Welcome back to another episode of Built and Backed. I'm super excited to have Andrew Ackerman joining us today. Andrew is a VC, angel investor, SPV syndicate sponsor, and former entrepreneur with over a decade of startup investing experience in 70 plus early stage deals. A former generalist who later specialized in ed tech and now focuses on prop tech and construction tech, Andrew has built a reputation for turning networks into true platforms. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. As we were sharing before we began recording, I'm very excited to have you on because you've kind of jumped around to a few different types of positions. I think it'll be really interesting to hear more about that and kind of what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so for actually, I should have asked you what the demographics of your audience are, but if anyone's younger and watching it and they're very concerned about like, oh, I have to have a career direction. I have a daughter who's finished her first year of college. She's also like, what's my correction for my direction for my career? Like mine's zigzagged. So like,
Mhm.
don't stress too much. So I started off, I'm like horribly old. So I finished business school in the 90s. And this whole like, oh, we're going to do like a startup thing, that meant you were unemployed back then. So there was no like entrepreneurship class or anything like that. So, I get out of Chicago booth and they're like, door on the right's for investment banking, door on the left is for, consulting.
Mhm.
And, if you're here for marketing, you went to the wrong school. So I did consulting for a couple of years because I knew didn't want to be a banker, and I was hoping that I would fall in love with some industry, and that would be my career. And then 4 years later, I'm on a project where we're using this cool thing called the interwebs to merge data from two companies that wanted to actually merge, like a merger, but we did it in a way where like no one had to see anyone else's data. We just pushed the pro formas up, and I remember
Mhm.
thinking, that's cool. That's what I wanted to do. It didn't exist 5 years ago, but that's it. I'm going to do that. So I quit my job, moved back to New York. Within 9 months, I'm in my first startup, and I spend 8 years building this startup. And then I made a whole ton of mistakes, but none of them killed the company. And then I worked at a family office, which is kind of the other side of the table, but for
Mhm.
rich individuals. And I did another startup because why not? I didn't really like the family office, but I learned a lot. And then ultimately, after that, I transitioned into more of an accelerator and VC role. So it's all very zigzaggy. But the cool thing about it is that from any experience that you have, you can usually take something away that you use with you to do what you do, but to do it better and differently than anyone else. So,
Yeah.
for example, like all that stuff I did in consulting for like Fortune 100 companies, they might think, well, okay, that was a waste of 4 years just waiting for the internet to happen. But it turns out, like I do a lot of consulting right now for Fortune 100 companies who are thinking about setting up corporate venture funds or venture studios or accelerators. And I'm actually more effective at it than someone who just did his or her career in just VC
Mhm.
because I've had that experience. And when I started running the accelerator and we were trying to design programs that would really help these startups get customers, knowing how a Fortune 100 company operates from the inside made it possible for me to design a program that was actually effective at getting the startups to the right people at the right time at the right pace. So, to all the people starting out, it's okay to wander a little bit in the desert, but all those things add up to something that when you choose your direction more purposefully, you can be kind of unique and advantaged at doing something the way only you can do it.
Totally. And I'm curious to hear if becoming a VC was always your end goal or if it was something that you kind of just like stumbled into and didn't exactly anticipate getting into.
There were 600 people in my class in business school. There was one guy, Ben, who was in VC. No one knew what Ben did. And
Yeah.
ironically, I'm in touch with Ben because we used to ski together. But now, like 10 years or 20 years later, well, more than 20 years later, but like, 10 years after that, all of a sudden I'm in VC. I'm like, Ben, I know what you do now. I'm doing it. Help. Yeah, so no, it wasn't even on my radar. I mean, it was
Yeah.
VC is I guess we're nominally in finance, but we're like such a small, neglected little corner compared to all the rest of finance
Mhm.
that, until like the internet started taking off, like who knew about it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting to think like you said, how your classmate Ben, you didn't even know what he did. And then all of a sudden now you must be looking back saying, oh, now I am doing what Ben did and now I know it.
Yeah, and now we share deals, which is like kind of cool. Of course, he's like
Mhm.
10 years ahead in that career path than I am, but again, I do it differently because of where I came from. So, it all adds up.
Right. And that was one thing that I was thinking too, is that knowing that you worked for two startups, I believe you said, and then also had your own company, I think being able to have experience on the other end of that, I think totally, I'm assuming, has really influenced and led to great benefits for your career now as a VC.
Yeah, yeah. So back in the old days, most of the VCs were just finance guys. They'd come, I'm just finance. They were finance guys. Very
Mhm.
few of them had done startups on their own because it just wasn't like tech startups were just such a small piece of it. So that a lot of them were traditional finance, understanding how it worked. And at some point the equation started to shift where a lot of people who had a startup, had a good exit, they started doing some angel investing, like, well, maybe I should do this more professionally. Maybe I should step it up instead of just making an investment here or there every couple of months. Maybe I want to do this as part of a fund. I want to take other people's money in. So you got an influx of former founders into the VC space somewhere in the 2000s.
Mhm.
And for a while, it was an advantage because, like, let's say you actually have a startup, and let's say you're fortunate enough to have a startup that's kind of cool and hot, and you've got a bunch of VCs who are into it. One of the skills a person in VC needs to do is not just find a lot of deals, filter the deals to the ones that they need to spend time on, and diligence the deals. They have to convince guys, or guys, non-gender specific guys, but guys like you, to take their money, because the
Mhm.
best entrepreneurs can choose who they want to have on their cap table. So if they have the choice between you, Ashley, who's had a startup like them and been through it in the trenches, or hey, Bob, who just did VC all his life, a lot of the best founders were choosing VCs that had at least one or two people on their team that had done startups before. So it was an advantage.
Yeah.
And now I think the ratio has shifted. The majority of people in venture have done startups before. I think I don't have data.
Mhm.
So it's almost now evened out. And if you don't, well, somebody else on your team does. But that's something
Right.
that can evolve over my lifetime.
Yeah, yeah, and it's ironic that you bring that up about how it's shifting now to VCs, a lot of VCs being former founders. I mean, I just interviewed someone recently for this podcast who had started a company. He pitched his company to the VC firm that he now works for. So it's kind of like that full circle
Yeah,
moments like that.
yeah. I know a guy who pitched his startup to me when I was running the accelerator.
Mhm.
It wasn't a good idea. I mean, and he later said, like, this is my last chance pitching it. If it didn't work, I wasn't going to do it. And now he runs a VC, and his VC has got a lot more money behind it than mine. So, like, life, it takes weird directions.
It does. It does. And I would love to hear more about this accelerator that you ran because you'd mentioned that
Sure.
you really focused on helping these startups find their first customers, which, as we all know, is so important. So feel free to share more about that and kind of what the outcome was.
Sure, sure. Sit back. It'll take me about 3 hours. No, I'm just, I'll give you the shorter version. Um, so in the beginning, there was Y Combinator.
Hmm.
And then there was Techstars, and then there was Dreamit. Those are the first three accelerators in the world. And now there's, I don't know, 2,000 or more of them. The archetypical model that we think of when we think about an accelerator is really designed by Techstars and Dreamit. The idea that you think of, like, oh, here's a room, there's 10 to 12 tables. Each table has about 3 or 4 seats on it. And that's the founding team of a pre-seed, pre-revenue, hopefully they have more than just an idea, startup. And they could be all different industries. And 12 o'clock comes around and people come in with pizza, and then there's a speaker, and then you do that for 12 weeks, and then there's demo day at the end. And that model worked pretty well for many, many years. Everyone started copying it. When too many people start doing something at that point, like, the uniqueness goes away and becomes less effective. Uh, the better accelerators were still good at that because the best startups want to be with the best investors, and the best investors want to be with the best startups. So the accelerator that's kind of got into the middle of that marketplace early, and has chosen good startups, has an advantage. That's why Y Combinator is in such a strong position today. Uh, so we were doing that for a while, and then we got a new CEO, and he challenged the group and he said, "Would you say we're what are we, like top five in the top five accelerator in the world? At the time we were. Great. He's like, I want to be number one. Can we be number one in this space? So we looked around the room, it was very uncomfortable. We didn't think we could take Y Combinator down. It's like, that's what I thought too. Build me something else where we can be number one,
Mm.
which is interesting advice for startups too. But we started to think about what we did really well. And customer introductions were one of them. We were known for that. It wasn't just what we thought, but we were known for it. So we built an entire program around, well, who benefits the most from the introductions we can. So super early stage, yes, but the ones that are one step beyond that, that already have like product market fit, they got a couple of customers, and now they need to scale so they can raise an A round. Not only are they will they benefit from it, but no one's playing in that space, and we can be more effective for them because they're ready to
Mhm.
work with corporates. So we took ripped the entire program up. It was like 70% remote even before COVID. And it was all focused on these customer sprints and on investor sprints at the end. No demo day, no speakers, no pizza, still plenty of beer, but just not the same.
Mhm.
So, we purposely blew up what we were doing because, I guess we were a victim of our success in that regard, but there were a lot of other people doing it. And now it's come to the point where I've either run, designed, advised, or consulted for a good 2 dozen different types of accelerator models.
Oh, wow. Do you think, in your opinion, that a founder being a part of an accelerator is crucial to its success?
Um, Crucial is a hard word.
Yeah.
The right accelerator can be. So it's
Mhm.
interesting, right? So, part of why I wrote this book was to get all these little scattered pieces of advices in one coherent narrative. So there's one section in it where the founder of the startup in the book is trying to decide, does he take an offer for this particular accelerator? And the way I tell the story, I try to tell it as an actual story. He's actually in a dojo, like sparring, and he's thinking about how he chose which form he wanted to choose, and he thinks about like different people in his class. Some people wanted it for the fitness, some people wanted it for self-defense, other people did it for the social element of it. And he starts thinking by analogy that there are different things you can get out of an accelerator. It
Mhm.
depends on who you are and what you need. So there's the basic block and tackle of building a startup. If you just don't know where to begin, that's one thing you can get. Then there's the customer introductions, which we talked about. And then, of course, there are the investor introductions. And then there's like coaching, communities, a whole bunch of other things. And depending on what you, for your startup, need the most, an accelerator could be a good fit for you, or it could be utterly superfluous.
Mm.
So that's the way you need to think about it. And I would say, just in general, if you are thinking about it, uh, from what you need, you design the kind of questions that you need to ask to figure out if that particular program is any good at getting you where you want to go.
Yeah, that's a really good point to bring up there. So think about like what exactly the intentions of being a part of the accelerator would do for you rather than just kind of going in and assuming it's going to help you.
Yeah.
Think about, what does this accelerator specialize in? Can it help me achieve what I'm looking to do? And do the two of them align?
Yeah. And it's not that different from, say, college that way,
Mhm.
right? Your major matters, the quality of the school overall matters, their placement office, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. And I know that you also, at one point in your career, were an angel investor, maybe even still are, but I'm curious to hear like what bridged the gap from being an angel investor to then becoming a VC.
So yeah, I'm a once and future angel. So I started off after I had actually in the middle of my first startup. I had a friend from business school. He was getting his PhD when I was getting my MBA.
Mhm.
He had started an angel group, and he has like, oh, listen, we have this kind of pickup game. I find these startups, if they're interested, you can come in. It's a relatively small check. I say relatively because like normal America is like, oh my God, that's a lot of money, but not for like funding a startup. And I was like, okay, this seems interesting. So he brought me an idea. It was a pharmaceutical company in the Alzheimer's space.
Mhm.
Right. And I had like zero reason to be in that startup. Like I didn't know the technical side. I'd never done any angel investing before. Uh, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. The business model seemed pretty good. And I trusted Ira. So I gave him the money. And it just like if you went down to, say, Atlantic City or Vegas and you put like a $100 chip on 17 at the roulette wheel and you won, you would realize like logically, no skill involved, right?
Hmm.
You did nothing. You just got lucky, but you're still hooked. So this one did well and I was hooked. So I did a bunch of other angel investment, a total of 5 or 6 before I joined Dreamit and started doing this kind of more programmatically. And that was a different ball game entirely.
Yeah. And that's really interesting to think about. Like you said, going from having a small check that is or small to you, but is huge to people like us, and then kind of getting to where you are today with that.
Yeah. By the way, like people like me, people like you, us, like I wasn't that much different back then. Yeah, for a guy down in Arkansas who's like working at Walmart making $38,000 a year, it's like, it's embarrassing for me to say it's a relatively small check.
Mhm.
So, sometimes I have to pull myself out of the bubble and remind myself that there is a real world out there.
Mhm.
But to get to your other question, moving from an angel investor who saw 2 or 3 startups a month, if he
Mhm.
wanted to invest, he could invest. If he didn't want to invest, great, we wait another month, 2 months until something good comes along. Moving from that to particularly to an accelerator, which is the exact opposite end of the spectrum, and an early stage accelerator where you're looking for 10 to 12 startups in all different industries. And to get there, I have to look at over 1,000 applications.
Oh
And oh,
gosh.
by the way, you recruit for a class, a cohort. So I had to look at those 1,000 applications in a 2 month period. And if that's not bad enough, I have to leave room for second round and third round interviews. So I really
Mhm.
needed to go through all 1,000 in about a month, at least the first one, and weed out the ones I didn't want, and then think about 50 that I wanted to interview, and then, the 15 that we wanted to like go to the next stage with because a couple won't take the deal. And that was a whole different game. I mean, going from
Mhm.
like, oh, I get 2 or 3 or 1 or 2, whatever it is a month, to like, I need 1,000 this month. you know, Totally different game.
Yeah. And how did you juggle just that difference in volume? I mean, that's a huge difference and a huge leap.
It was hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. So the good news was that Dreamit had been doing it for a while at that point. I joined in 2014, and Dreamit had been around since 2008. So
Hmm.
reputation helped. There was still somewhat early in the accelerator cycle, so there weren't thousands of accelerators. There may have been a few hundred.
Right.
And Dreamit had a good reputation, so it was still sort of noteworthy and newsworthy when we opened up applications. So we got some free press that way.
Hmm.
I did a lot of events, like physical events on the ground, because at that stage, we were still sort of geographically focused,
Hmm.
but that was already starting to fall apart. Like we would have companies in Austin apply to the New York program because the timing was better, and New York companies apply to the Austin program because that timing was better for them. So it was
Yeah.
already starting to unravel, but physical events still mattered. We would go to that. At that point, AngelList was kind of like a LinkedIn for startups.
Hmm.
But we scraped the hell out of that, and like I would say we spammed people because they kind of wanted it. But we did some very targeted mass emails, let's just say, to generate inbound. And then also Twitter really worked pretty well for us at that
Yeah.
point in time. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was a total rethinking of how do we scale this thing?
Hmm. And this question might be a little bit broad depending on the accelerator, but in your experience, having reviewed probably throughout all this time tens of thousands of applications, I wouldn't be
Yeah,
surprised. Like, what would make a startup or founder like get picked? Like, what kind of sets them apart from others and kind of increases their chances of being
sure,
selected?
sure. I'm going to tell you what we looked for when
Yeah.
we were like an early stage pre-seed. I'll tell you what I look for now.
Hmm.
And I'll make no apology. Some of these things are grossly unfair to a first-time founder. Because the
Yeah.
number one thing I'm looking for is, have you had prior exits?
Hmm.
Like a team that's done it before and had an exit, awesome. Like they're almost in. A team that's done the startup before hasn't really had a good exit, or whatever, it didn't work out, but they shut it down. That's fine. They learned on someone else's dime and time. That helps. At least they know what's going on. If you are maybe not a founder, but one of the early employees at a startup, so at least you know what that's about. Like those are all good things.
Hmm.
Right? Us knowing that you actually know what it feels like goes a long way. In fact, that's actually part of the other reason I wrote this book like a novel rather than a how-to guide, is I wanted people to understand what it actually feels like to be in a startup, not the glossy Steve Jobs biopics or like, the overly dramatic Facebook movie, like the actual day-to-day of doing a startup. So knowing that a founder had done that, and ideally done that successfully, was the biggest leg up they can get.
Yeah.
So that was number one.
Mhm.
The other stuff is not going to be a huge surprise to you, right? The idea has to be something that wasn't solvable before, but is now.
Mhm.
Otherwise, tons of people are already trying it. It has to be, big and painful. And by that, I mean frequent, intense, and widespread. Right? That's a good problem. And the solution has to be something that couldn't have been done 3 years ago, as I mentioned, and has to be a very large market. Because
Mhm.
I can have a great team, very painful problem that they're solving in a very topical way. But if the market's small, great, I won and I didn't make money. So like, those are the I was gonna say trifecta, but that's four. So quadfecta that we're looking for.
Yeah. So the first one aside, having that prior experience, would you say that there's still an opportunity for someone who's totally new to the game to have the
Yeah.
chance to get into it?
Yeah. So like I would have loved to only have experienced founders, but of course sometimes somebody is new.
Hmm.
So the other things that we would look at, or if you were to B2B startup, industry experience matters a lot. In a
Hmm.
lot of industries, especially in prop tech and construction tech, it's really hard. Like you don't have the street cred if you haven't worked in the industry for 5 or 10 years at least. I
Yeah.
can think of two founders in all my 6 or 7 years of investing in this space who had no prior experience in the space and still built successful companies.
Oh, wow.
So that helps a lot. Certainly, if you've gone to like very impressive schools and maybe you have impressive technical skills that are very hard to find, like that helps a lot. I
Hmm.
mean, really, at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is, here's your team slide. It's not who. I don't care about who. I care about why. Why is this the team that's going to outcompete everyone else who have kind of come up with similar or kind of sort of the same solutions to this problem? Why is these guys, why are they going to win over, the 20 other people, 20 other teams that are out there?
Yeah. I think that's important too, because seeing how a team can work together, the unique experiences they bring to the table, like you said, is so important to think about, and what will really help them succeed in their startup as they're building it.
Oh, you actually raised a good point. Um, Teams that have worked together before have an advantage over ones that have never built something together.
Hmm.
Because then I can take out like not always, but I can reduce the quotient of potential founder drama.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
And I'll tell you something I've done that most people don't do. I've invested in husband-wife teams before. There's a lot of VCs who won't do
Interesting.
it. Like the stress of doing a founder, like just you're in each other's faces all the time.
Hmm.
And there have been some bad experiences, like startups died, the marriages died, both have died. Uh, but I've done it, and I've actually it's never blown up on me. And here's the interesting part: in all those cases, the woman was the CEO, and the husband was the CTO. Now, on the one, you're like, oh, like the guy's a CTO, that's like whatever, typical. But a lot of female founders are the CEOs, and I've done it in. One was in prop tech, hospitality tech. Another was in um, ed tech. Oh, I'm sorry. The third one, the man was the CEO, and his wife was the CMO.
Hmm.
So I did that also in prop tech. I think I did a fourth. I can't remember, but yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and another in prop tech, and she was a CEO and he was a CTO.
Interesting. And I think that, I mean, it makes me think of the whole idea of like the greater the risk, the greater the reward. So I can imagine in some of those instances that investing in these husband and wife teams that other VCs might have been more hesitant to do could lead to a good outcome in the long run.
I wasn't smart enough to think about it that way, to be honest. No, but in all my cases, I had one advantage. Like I was investing at a slightly later stage, not the pre-seed, pre-revenue. This was post-revenue. So
Okay.
all of those teams had been together for a couple of years already.
Mhm.
So I would have imagined that they would have gone through the stressful point that would have killed one or both of the marriage or the VC already. So I had
Yeah.
a little bit of comfort there. And also when we interviewed them, like I was very conscious of the dynamic between husband and wife, how they interacted professionally in that interview. So that was one
Mhm.
thing we looked for. But I did it, and I had a lot of people who wouldn't.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I know you mentioned too that you had started as a generalist and then specialized in ed tech,
Mhm.
and then now have gone on to specialize in prop tech and construction tech. So
Yeah,
this is a few pronged question here, but I'm curious to hear one, what made you originally want to specialize in ed tech, and then two, what made you kind of switch gears from ed tech to prop tech and construction tech now?
sure. Okay. Answer number one, money. Answer
Mm.
number two, more money. You want the longer version? I'll give you the longer
Yeah.
version. Okay. So about when we were making that switch, so we want to build something a little later stage. One of the founders of Dreamit, who was a Penn State alumni, had managed to pitch Penn State on sponsoring an ed tech program. So they paid us $1 million. That's why we did it. And then the new
Mhm.
CEO looks around the room and it's like, well, the health tech guys are doing their thing. That was kind of our flagship product at the time. It's like, we're not going to change anything there yet. Andrew, you haven't started recruiting from New York yet. You're going to build this. Oh, and wait, didn't you work for Kaplan Test Prep for 9 months? Awesome. Perfect for ed tech. And
Mhm.
being like the ex-consultant, dick that I was, I'm like, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. Give me a couple of weeks. I'll figure it out. And it took a little longer than that. But, they were giving me a blank sheet of paper to build something totally new
Yeah.
and $1 million from Penn State to do it on. I'm like, yeah, I could be happy with that. So we did that for a little over a year, and we made 17 investments in the space. I was very worried, by the way, that I'd be bored out of my gourd because like I'm so used to being a generalist and I only have to do ed tech. But it turns out, and I've learned this about myself, that once you start getting into something, suddenly you see like there's a whole lot of diversity within it. So actually, I really wasn't struggling for really cool ed tech startups when we were doing it. So that was how I got into it. How I got into prop tech, similar story. I was introduced to a man named Jeff Binnick, who used to run Magellan. He now owns the Tampa Bay Lightning. And since I'm married to a Canadian, that's a big deal. So he moved to Tampa. He wanted to build something, for the startup ecosystem there. So, like the genius that I am, when my friend tells me this, I'm like, yeah, we don't want to build an accelerator in Tampa. And he goes, Andrew, you're being very dumb right now. Hang up the phone, Google Jeff Vinnick, and then call me back. So I Google him and I'm like, Magellan, Tampa Bay Lightning. I'm like, that's like three more zeros than I thought was on this guy's name. Call back, Barani. Yeah, I'm a moron, but I'm a little bit better educated moron now. What does Vinnick have in mind? So it actually turned out that he had an interesting idea around bringing innovation to Tampa. It wasn't, let's put up an accelerator, early stage, speaker, pizza, beer, demo day model that we talked about before. He's like, he didn't want to bribe a second or a third tier startup to move their three people down to Tampa. What he wanted was the best startups in the country or the world to come to Tampa periodically to sell to and to meet with and sell to the large and mid-sized companies in Tampa that actually employ most of the people. Because his thesis was a very large private wealth management firm like Raymond James, based in Tampa, wouldn't otherwise get access to the innovation that, say, a Goldman Sachs gets access to because it's up in New York. So he
Oh,
wanted to level the playing field by having the startups visit and meet with customers. And since we had made that switch to like, it's all about customers, it's all about introductions to customers, it's all about driving revenue, and then the investor side, that fit 100%. And we had been looking at prop tech for a while. But we're just like, well, who do we partner with? How do we jumpstart it? Uh, and it happened to be the case that he was also renovating 50 plus acres of downtown waterfront property.
oh wow.
So we're like, wait a second, right? His idea is entirely simpatico with our idea for the later stage program. And he's putting $3 billion into renovating Tampa. So he's got general contractors, he's got architecture firms, he's got leasing offices, he's got property management companies. He has a whole bunch of customer sprint partners
Mhm.
right there on a tray for us. And then when we would go to startups and say like, hey, we want you to go to Tampa to meet with customers, they go, well, why Tampa? I'm like, hey, $3 million project, $1 billion project, biggest project or second biggest project in the country. You should be there. So it just all came together very well.
Yeah. It sounds like it's kind of like divine timing, really. I mean, having all these few things kind of lined up all at once, and it was just the perfect opportunity that just came together.
Yeah, it seems like that. So, but the 2 years of wandering in the wilderness behind, no one actually pays attention to. And that's the other thing
Yeah.
with startups. Like you'll hear it say, it's an overnight success that took 7 years to build.
Hmm. That's
Um,
true.
yeah, so I'm a firm believer in luck happens to everybody equally,
Hmm.
but for most people, you're not prepared for it, so you can't take advantage of it. And that's
Yeah.
what successful or lucky startup is. It's a startup that was ready for when luck broke its way.
Hmm. Yeah. And from when you went from prop tech to construction tech, what was that like?
Well, no, we went to them together.
Gotcha.
At the time we got in there, construction tech was like the smallest little appendix on the end of prop tech. And prop tech itself wasn't very big, but it was at a point where we thought it was just at that inflection point.
Hmm.
So we hopped on prop tech and we sort of added construction tech as an afterthought. Now, construction tech is probably the most interesting sector that I know of, at least to me personally. It's just so much opportunity.
Yeah, I kind of see that, especially because previously, I think at least the trade specifically, there are a lot of like outdated practices and systems and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So there's just, like you said, so much opportunity for innovation and being able to create products and services that can really transform the industry entirely.
Yeah. And it's a crazy hard industry, right? So like I'll give you an
Hmm.
example. You see this chart a lot, like manufacturing versus construction. You know, you have heavy equipment for both. You're building stuff. It seems on the surface very similar. And if you look at productivity per worker in manufacturing, up and to the right since 1950. If you look at the productivity per worker in construction, it's actually down a little.
Oh, wow.
Right. So, you can argue about the data. Some people are like, yeah, productivity's down because now fewer people die. But we've taken our savings in safety, but let's put that aside for a moment. The structural issues are major, right? So if I own a manufacturing plant and I'm making widgets, and by the way, I've tried Googling it. I don't know what a widget looks like, but we've used that as an example since econ, 1910. But like I'm making widgets, right? I order the steel. Right? I may actually send the trucks to pick it up even. I may even control the transport. Everyone in the factory is my employee. Every piece of equipment in that factory I bought, I'm paying the rent. Anything that I ship out, I made, and I'm paying for the shipping out. And I make the profit. It's all me. It's a single actor for everything. Now, in construction, you have the developer comes up with the idea, comes up with the money. Then they get an architect involved to help vet different concepts, and they build a bunch of different models, and then ultimately they choose the one they want to actually build. And then they bring in a general contractor, and the architect tosses the plan over to the GC. GC looks at it, says, "Well, that's not going to work," and they go back and forth. And then finally, the GC is selected, and then the GC goes out and hires subcontractors. 80% of the people on the site are not employees of the general contractor. They're electricians, they're like painters, they're glaziers, they're all different trades. And by the way, there's a 30% shortage in the trades anyway. So, like, there's a lot of delays there. And the equipment belongs to the subs. Maybe it sometimes belongs to the GC, maybe it doesn't. And then when you're done, GC's gone, great, time and materials, right? I'm paid regardless of what happens to the building. Architect's paid by the hour, so again, different incentives. And then you've got a leasing department. Could be in-house in the property manager. It could be a separate company like a real estate brokerage. Well, they have different incentives too. And then once the building's up and stabilized, you've got a different property manager come in. So there are 5 or 6 or 7 different actors involved in any given real estate project from soup to nuts, and they all have different incentives and they all have different willingness to adopt technology. So let's just take a silly example. I'm the developer. I want everyone on the same communication system so that everything comes into the same point. Well, all those other subcontractors, they're like, yeah, on the other project, they use a different one. I'm not switching. So that's been really hard.
Yeah, it's interesting to think that about like just being able to get people to get past their own ways, really, and
Yeah.
be open to change.
Yeah, and that at least we saw happening. Like we saw
Mhm.
they were open to change. If it's hard and they're not willing to push, it's a fail. If it's
Yeah.
hard and they're willing to push, at least you have a shot. And things are moving. Things are moving.
Yeah, that's true. Now I'd love to hear about your book. I'm curious to hear what inspired you to write it, what it's about, what it really covers. Feel free to give us all the details on it.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So a couple of things came together. So I have a confession to make. I really, really, really don't like business books. Um, and God, it's embarrassing even to say it. So, with very few exceptions, most of the business books I've written, and I'm including the good ones on this, are 20 to 30 page PowerPoints that have been stretched out to 250 pages. And they seem to get the same guy from Indiana to ghostwrite them all, right? Very cheerful, right? And it's like anecdote, 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 name drop, name drop, name drop, one page summary at the end of each chapter.
Mhm.
And guess what? If you went and you ripped out those one-page summaries and you stapled them together, you'd have a great 20-page PowerPoint right there. So even the ones that have really good, interesting idea, like my eyes start to glaze over. I can't read more than 10 pages at a time.
Yeah.
So I swore I would never write a book like that. Now, at the same time, when I was giving advice to all these founders, what I found the advice that stuck the best were stories about other startups that were in a similar situation and how they got around it. They're good. They have plot arcs. They're good guys, beginning, middle, end, bad guys or implied bad guys. And that's what founders remembered. And those are the advice that stuck really well. That
Mhm.
and occasionally jokes, which I'm happy to tell you later if you want. I'll tell you my favorite startup joke if you want. But stories are super memorable that way. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why like every religion that I know of to man, their founding document are the stories. It's not just, oh, here's a constitution of things to do.
Mhm.
So, kind of hit me like, oh, if I'm going to give advice, it has to be in story form. And then the third piece clicked. So when I was in business school, again, dawn of time, there's one book and one book only that I remember. It's called The Goal. So the goal, if you went to business school in the 80s, 90s, even into the early 2000s, was a novel about a manager who had to go turn around a printing plant. And he was in over his head, had no idea what to do. He meets this consultant on an airplane, very thinly disguised version of the author, who kind of coached him through it. And then through the story of this one guy's life, got across the basic ideas about business strategy and operations. Right? Not awesome writing. I mean, it's not John Grisham. It's not, pick your favorite author, but super, like, better than a textbook by far. So, like, all these things are percolating. I'm like, oh, I want to tell stories because they're the most effective way to get the advice across. And here's a template. It's a book. I'm just going to write the goal for startups. So I wrote it as a novel. That's why we've got, the pun there. So I wrote it as a novel about a fictional founder who takes an idea all the way through until he gets his first round of financing. And he's got an angel investor that becomes his mentor, takes him under his wing and helps him along the way.
And like you said, being able to take stories because people really grasp onto that. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I feel like being able to take those stories and pull it together in this book that you've written to help people really grasp the fundamentals and the advice that you're sharing, I think is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was actually the hardest part, to be honest. Right. So I had three challenges when I sat down to write it. One was just length. I've written a bunch of articles. I've written 70 articles pretty much, almost 70, over 70. I can't remember. But they're all 800, 500 to 800 words long.
Mm-hmm.
So simply being able to write something that's 200 plus pages long, where every page has as much information density and need to be there as every other page, not again 20 pages strung out. I wasn't sure I could do that. So that was number one. Challenge number two was in those short articles, they're all my voice.
Yeah.
So a novel has to have different voice, right? Different people, different characters. So I ended up actually, when I wrote the book, I had very specific people, real people in mind as those characters, people who I thought kind of typified that character. And whenever I wanted dialogue, I would just imagine that other person saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it comes across, well. But the last piece is like, you know, I got to find a way to make this part of a story rather than just two guys looking at a pitch deck in a conference room at WeWork.
Yeah.
So that's what before with the guy thinking about accelerators in the dojo context, or the founder and his buddy going out and having drinks, and the buddy's kind of complaining about how he finally uh, bit the bullet and got a matchmaker to meet somebody, and then how it was like great at first, and then like all the people they set him up with were kind of like maybe a little on the spectrum. And it occurs to him that the reason it wasn't working was matchmakers, they'll take your $5,000, anyone. They have no incentive to say no. They have no skin in the game. So, it was great. You got one-on-one attention, but then you got matched with anybody. It was no signal. And then it clicks for the founder that, oh, that's what was bothering him about this other group that was offering to make paid introductions for him while he was raising money. He realized that there was no filter there. There's no positive signal. In fact, there's a negative signal in the real world for guys like me if an agent says, hey, I'm representing the startup, because it tells me that the founder doesn't really get how important that relationship is. They think they can outsource it. But I use that scene where they're drinking at the bar talking about his buddy's love life to illustrate what's wrong about paid introductions in a VC context. But I had to go like, chapter by chapter, and like, how do I create a story that gets each point across?
Yeah. And you brought up a really good point and reminder about like building those solid relationships and having people that trust you and you've shown your credibility to and all of that stuff. And so I'm curious to hear, knowing that you have built so many relationships in the industry, like who is someone that is doing something cool in tech right now that you'd love to give a shout out to?
I want to give a shout out to Tvika Grainer. It's so I should warn you, I have three daughters, they're teenage daughters. Nothing I invest into them is cool. But it's cool to me. So Zvika is the founder of this is Israeli startup called RoboShoot. They make robots that clean the trash chutes in like multifamily buildings or commercial
Oh,
offices.
wow.
Like they kind of stay up on top, kind of like a spider in their lair at the top, and then like 3 o'clock in the morning, they lock the doors to the chutes, and it Spider-Man's its way down, and it disinfects the sides, so you don't have mold growing there. And if anything's kind of semi-jammed, it dislodges it, and then
Mhm.
it Spider-Man's its way back up. So again, like I have an odd idea what cool is, but the reason Zvika's top of mind is I've been talking with him over the past 2 weeks about kind of jump starting his seed round, and I just got a text from him yesterday. I may be in New York tomorrow. I signed a term sheet. In fact, we're supposed to be talking today because things are starting to move really fast for him.
Oh, I love that. So exciting. Andrew, this has been a really great episode, and I've really enjoyed having you come on the show to share everything you've done in tech throughout the years. And now I'd love to have you share with our listeners where they can find you online because they'd like to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fairly easy to find online. I guess most investors, it's on our interest to be.
Mhm.
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Andrew Ackerman. If he looks kind of like me, that's the guy. Uh, please don't message me directly on LinkedIn. I get too many randos that way.
Mhm.
But I have my email address there. If you're a startup, just say something like, I saw you on Built and Back podcast, and then tell me about your startup. You can find me on X, Andrew Ackerman or Andrew B. Ackerman. Just be careful because the other guy writes for the Wall Street Journals and we get each other's DMs all the time. And I'm also on Instagram, but I'm a little less active there. But yeah, you can find me there. If you have a startup, just pitch me the way I talked about. If you just kind of interested, follow me. You can also find the book on Amazon. Hint, hint. It's not. It's just. I don't think there's any other Andrew Ackerman who's written the Entrepreneur's Odyssey. Hardest part will be spelling Odyssey. That's hard.
I'll link to all those places in the show notes so our listeners can click through
Thank
and
you.
find you everywhere online. But thank you so much again for coming on this week's show.
Well, thank you for having me. This was fun.